going on, good people? This is the Common Man Nate Lewis with a common look at wrestling. My very first podcast. Hopefully with more to come. Today I want to talk about something that's been on my mind for the last couple of weeks here. My love of the WWE. A lot has changed in my last couple of months. Mostly my viewing habits, but the biggest thing is I find myself watching less and less WWE. First, let's go back to last year's SummerSlam. WWE in Brooklyn for NXT, SummerSlam, Monday Night Raw. And going into that weekend, I was stoked. NXT was hot. First time in a crowd that size, 15,000 people in the arena in attendance. SummerSlam, huge main event, Brock Lesnar and Undertaker. And of course, after a pay-per-view event like that, Monday Night Raw, where the fans, they can be the best part of the show. Anyway, I was excited for this pay-per-view. I had to work each night of all three of these shows. So NXT took place on Saturday. I rushed home right after work, immediately popped that on, enjoyed it. Bayley and Sasha tore the house down. Loved that match. So SummerSlam, didn't get a chance to get to that till Monday. I watched that Monday morning before I headed out for work. And then Raw was watched probably, I want to say, by Wednesday. Had to wait a couple days on that one, but finally got to watch Raw. I was stoked for that weekend. And then after that, I stopped watching. And when I said I stopped watching, I didn't watch Raw, didn't watch SmackDown, didn't watch NXT. I still kept up with the shows through various sorts of online memes and listening to Brian Alvarez and Wrestling Observer. So I was able to keep up with what was going on in storyline, but I just stopped watching. There was no rhyme or reason for it. Just didn't interest me anymore. At that time, I was spending actually a lot more time watching UFC and different things in MMA. And one of the things that brought to my attention that I had stopped watching WWE was a night where I was looking for a good fight to watch. As I just got off of work, long day, said, hey, I'll pop on a fight using UFC Fight Pass, and I'll find me something to watch. And then at that point, I kind of realized, WWE Network's been sitting here on my Apple TV, and for the last month, I hadn't watched anything. So I said, what the hell? I'll go ahead and I'll watch NXT. So I watched a couple weeks of NXT, and it kind of got me back into a rhythm, which I've been on ever since then. But to this day, I still have not seen Night of Champions, which was the pay-per-view right after SummerSlam. I had no interest in seeing that show, and I'm a big Sting fan and still have yet to see that show. But that kind of actually brings me to my topic now, which I want to talk today. We're coming up on the 3rd year anniversary of the WWE Network. As you can remember, WWE Network launched right prior to WrestleMania 30, one of the bigger WrestleManias in recent memories. I've been a subscriber to the WWE Network since day one. I remember day one of the network launching, and at the time I was living in a rural area, so I had a DSL internet for those who can remember back when DSL was a thing. Some of you might still be on DSL. I'm sorry for you. But I mean, my download speed was a little bit over 1 megabit per second. And if those who remember signing up for the first day of WWE Network, remember there was a lot of issues initially signing up. I spent 90 minutes close to signing up for the WWE Network. And I'm along with a lot of people actually had problems and just getting to watch the network. And like I said, I lived in a rural area, so it made things very difficult. But finally, when I was able to sign up, one of the biggest sales was you get all the pay-per-views, every pay-per-view in history, from WWE, WCW, and ECW. So me being the fan that I am, the very first event I went to go load was ECW Heatwave 1998. I remember as being a much younger child, I was infatuated with ECW. It used to come on PAX TV, 1 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, some really weird time slot it was in. I went to go load that up, and I got buffering. And as I said before, I was in a rural area, bad internet. I said, okay, I'll go ahead and play it, and I'll let it load. I'll go do some other things, and I'll come back to it. So about an hour later, I come back, and I'm going to play it. I get about 30 seconds, and it buffers again. So, hey, No big deal. I'll maybe let it wait a little longer. Watch some other programming, get some more house chores done. Coming back several hours later, still buffering after about a minute of playing. And part of the reason I wanted to bring up buffering and why it was a big thing for me is I posted some questions on the Cult of Kayfabe Facebook group. If you are not aware or unfamiliar with Cult of Kayfabe, it is one of the best wrestling groups you will find online. If you have the chance now, go to Facebook, search Cult of Kayfabe, spelled Kult of Kayfabe. You will not regret it. But I posed some questions to the group today before I started this podcast, and buffering was a big issue among people who had subscribed or no longer subscribing, or even current subscribers. And like I said, one of the biggest things for me that first week or so, actually, was buffering in general. I remember the ECW pay-per-view would constantly buffer. I tried watching the Royal Rumble, I believe 1992, and had buffering issues. And so I tried newer events. I went to go look at a pay-per-view in 2012. I'm believing it was the Brock Lesnar John Cena pay-per-view, and same issue. However, every time I clicked out of each and every one of those events, the live stream worked perfectly. And for those who have been a subscriber since day one, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those first several days, the archives were down, but the live stream worked perfectly. And we'll get back to some of the issues with the network here in a second. I asked the question on Cult of Kayfabe, what was the biggest disappointment about the network? And buffering was definitely one of the bigger ones that would pop up. People to this day still are looking to watch a live pay-per-view or NXT should call it special events, NXT live event, and are still having issues with buffering. Another thing that was brought up was I'll say the lack of older shows or the completion of shows, such as NWA was brought up quite a bit. WCW Monday Nitro, which actually wasn't even available at the launch of the WWE Network. People are wanting Mid-South. People are wanting Georgia Championship Wrestling. People are wanting WCW Saturday Night. And these things are either they're on the network and they're out of order or incomplete or completely not on the network as it stands right now. Now like I said, we're going on the third year of the WWE Network, and one of the big things that was pushed at the time of the launch was being able to relive past memories. And for a lot of members, not only of just a group, but of the WWE universe, you're not able to fully get the grasp of that childhood memories that some of you may have, or maybe you're the type that just wants to go back and watch things how they used to be. And right now, the WWE Network is not providing that. Another thing I asked was if you were in charge of the WWE Network, what would you add, remove, change about the network itself? And aside from the completion of those old libraries and putting up older content in the archives, I was noticing that a lot of people were recommending that WWE add their WWE movies to the network, which quite honestly, I never thought of that before. WWE does have an array of movies that they've produced in the past, including movies starring The Miz, Dean Ambrose, The Rock, Halle Berry. All these movies that are produced by the WWE is not on the network. And while I think that it would be a great idea to possibly introduce those and have a section for those, it was also mentioning about producing new movies and having those exclusive to the network, which is something I would kind of stay away from doing. And the reason being is, part of the reason, and I'll get to this later, WWE does not produce a lot of new content and provide it on the network is for cost. They have a budget they like to maintain and stick to, and producing a movie is not cheap. And to add the cost of doing a full feature film and producing that and having that on the network, that just doesn't seem feasible. It's something I don't see happening in the near future, but it is an idea for later on. And that kind of brings me to something else that I think kind of needs to be brought to attention when, like I said, people brought up the fact of putting WWE produced movies on the network, something that hadn't even crossed my mind, is that we have to realize there's several different demographics that the WWE caters to. When you take a look at how SmackDown was in the mid 2000s, SmackDown, when Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio were having the Dominic storyline, is that SmackDown was bringing in a higher Hispanic and women rating, more so than Raw at the time. You look at Raw right now. Raw skews to a much older audience now than it ever has before. A lot of us romanticize the WWE Attitude Era. That Attitude Era had mostly kids. It was the largest kid audience of all time. And here we are in 2016 in the midst of the PG era, and there are less kids watching now than ever before. Total Divas, which isn't associated necessarily with just being a wrestling product, a reality TV show on E, pulls a large women audience. And WWE's hope is that women would watch Total Divas and be inclined to watch the women wrestle on Raw. And the rating for women on Raw, or the amount of women watching Raw based off of watching Total Divas, is almost non-existent. And of course, a lot of us don't really see, or a lot of us can see why that would be the case, seeing as how women up until recently have been portrayed on Raw. But there's a lot of different demographics that comes with WWE. And something like producing new shows, for example, we'll get into that now. Newer shows that's on the network, original programming. That's one of the biggest draws for me now. As I spoke earlier about NXT, not necessarily just original programming, actual in-ring product, but original programming was a huge draw for me. The day I signed up for the network, a couple weeks after, I found WrestleMania Rewind, which for those who have never seen an episode of Rewind, please go check it out. They would select a match that happened during WrestleMania. They would have interviews with different athletes, interviews with different wrestlers, and they would talk about the significance of the match itself, kind of building up the story, what led to the actual match taking place before airing the actual show. I thought it was well done. You just beautiful to watch. Great to see other people's thoughts and things like that when it came to certain matches. And after the match was played, you got a reaction. What happened with the storyline afterwards, different wrestlers' reactions to the match. It's a great show. No new episodes. WWE Countdown, same thing. I thought it was pretty cool. You have these funny little list. Best wrestler, worst submission hold, worst gimmicks. Just a lot of fun. Should be fairly cheap to produce. Something that's new and kind of fresh. That would be part of the network. No new shows. One of my favorites, actually, Table for Three recently. You take three WWE superstars, three legends, three divas, and you have them sit at a table, and they're not characters anymore. They're human beings. They're guys sitting around talking about the business. I thought it was great. One of my favorites was with the New Day, and getting to kind of see Kofi's funnier side, and Big E, and was it Kofi that had the fixation with apples? I mean, it was a fun show. Just great. The episode with the Medusa and some of the older generations of women's wrestlers. Just a great show, and no new episodes. You can go down the list. WWE rivalries, all these different shows that WWE was producing. They just stop, and this takes me back to there's being different demographics. Maybe the type or the demographic that would watch a kind of behind the scenes show, or a show about past events and different angles and storylines in the past, that maybe that demographic isn't producing for the WWE. But there's something WWE needs to keep in mind, is you do have different demographics, and those different demographics are purchasing your network for several different reasons. And just kind of going back real quick, I mentioned Table for Three was a recent WWE programming that was on the network. One of the things that brought me back to watching the network, aside from NXT, was WWE Breaking Ground, which was a behind-the-scenes look at some of the different NXT superstars and what they go through during the Performance Center. Just love the show. Got a chance to really kind of know different characters and different people within the business. Some people got to meet Robbie Brookside for the first time, getting kind of a glimpse of to who Corbin is, or getting a glimpse to see who Tyler Breeze is, or following Apollo Crews along. This was a great show that is I thought was wonderful. And just a few days ago, within the Cult of Kayfabe community, on one of the threads, it was brought up that someone hated the show, and the reason being is Tyler Breeze was a smug, arrogant, cocky person, and on the show we were meeting Tyler and getting to know him as being like this gentle guy, this sweet guy who, finds an abandoned dog and wants to adopt it, and taking the time to teach divas, and use the term divas. Wow. Showing some of the women wrestler kind of the ropes and secrets and tips, and just coming across as a really nice guy. And this person said, no, that's not what I need to see. I have this notion of who Tyler Breeze is, and this show is ruining it for me. Which I thought was a very interesting point, and I want to dive into that now. Is when the business got exposed, the wrestling business was exposed in the mid-90s with all the specials. If you were old enough to remember all the specials that would be on primetime television, tricks and how wrestlers do this and how they do that, and was it bad for the business? I think we're at this point now where some of us fans who grew up on wrestling in the during the boom period, the golden age, we're at that point now. We know, we've been smartened up. We know what this business is at this point, and kind of these behind the scene things are something now where we find that interesting. We want to know what goes on behind stage. We want to know how these guys prepare for a match. We want to know how these guys feel about the audience reaction to them. We're at that point. And again, it comes down to the difference in demographics when it comes to what the network actually provides. So, as I said, we're going into year 3 of the WWE Network. I'm not sure the exact number of subscribers right now. I know we're still over 1 million subscribers to the WWE Network, somewhere between 1 million and 1.4. So, at this point, the WWE was obviously expecting much larger audience at this point, much bigger number of subscribers, and they're not quite there yet. But going into year 3, I can honestly say the WWE Network is worth $9.99. And if you're listening to this right now and you don't believe it's worth $9.99, let me just bring you back to this one simple thing. When I asked what was the biggest accomplishment of the WWE Network, one of the things I put out there was, hey, guess what? The pay-per-views are on there. It's the greatest accomplishment, and also probably one of the worst mistakes WWE has ever made, is including its pay-per-views in the network cost. Let me tell you this. As I told you earlier, I'm a huge UFC fan. Dana White, president in charge of UFC, looks up to Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon has been doing pay-per-views for a long time, and Dana White definitely looks up to Vince McMahon as a promoter. UFC launched its version of the WWE Network, Fight Pass, in December of 2013, with the notion that it would not include pay-per-views in its subscription price. Once WWE announced that they were going to include pay-per-views with the network, Dana White sat up, ears perked up. Oh, how's this going to do? Is this going to work? Are they going to get the subscribers? Dana White and UFC, trust me, looked very closely at what the WWE Network is doing. Had the WWE Network pulled the kind of numbers they were projecting to do, had they done those type of numbers they were hoping to get, you best believe UFC would not be charging me $65 in high def to watch Conor McGregor. WWE at the time thought pay-per-view was a dying business. Their B-level pay-per-views were doing 150,000 buys. And so Vince decided, hey, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna put these pay-per-views on the WWE Network. We'll get millions and millions of subscribers. This thing will be big. It'll be huge. And at this point, still isn't quite where they want it to be. And at this point, UFC still does not have its pay-per-views on Fight Pass. In fact, in November and December of this past year, UFC produced 2 pay-per-views that topped 1 million buys. headlined by Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey. 2 pay-per-views back to back. Now think about this, people. Even during the hottest period in wrestling, the Attitude Era, WWE were not producing 2 pay-per-views that would generate 1 million buys in a year, much less back to back. UFC produced 2 pay-per-views that done that in 2015, along with 3 other pay-per-views that were damn near close to 1 million themselves. So while the idea of the network providing pay-per-views and it being a great thing for the business, and it trust me, it was a huge accomplishment. I mean, it was they went balls deep into this thing, and they really put an effort into it. It just so far has not worked out. So I'm telling you right now, if you're one of those people who say, oh, well, I can get anything that's on the network for free on YouTube, I can stream the pay-per-views, guess what? You're ruining it for people like me who want to watch a UFC pay-per-view and I have to come up with $60 every month. Thank you for that. And with that, I'm going to call it a day. Once again, I want to thank the members of Cult of Kayfabe for their contribution to this particular podcast. I'm always looking for suggestions and ideas. Let me know how you feel about the show. If you have any ideas, suggestions, comments, anything like that, be sure to message me on Facebook, or you can find me on Twitter at Mr_Nate_Lewis. Send me all your suggestions and feedbacks there. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, this show will be on several different platforms, whether you're listening right now on SoundCloud, if you're listening on YouTube, or however you're listening to the show. I want to thank you so much. Make sure you spread the word. Will be doing a podcast on the state of UFC. Look for that coming here shortly. In the future, I hope to have different guests, different show topics, doing reviews of new shows, old shows, just whatever comes to mind. Just look for all that to be coming soon. Again, I want to thank you for listening. Peace and chicken grease.